Thank you so much for being on the programme today. I'm keen to talk to you about absences from school, childcare, a whole host of education policies. But on the programme today, we've been covering funding pressures on local councils, so I did want to just start off with that. One of the people that we heard from is Michael Jones. He's a Labour councillor from Crawley Borough Council. I think we can just hear what he told our correspondent Nick Martin earlier today.
We are, as a council, are currently looking at significant cuts because the amount of money that we get from the government, the amount of money that they will allow us as a maximum to raise council tax by is insufficient to cover the overall costs of the services, possibly even statutory minimum services.
So we're talking about cuts to council services, council tax going up, councils going bust. Would Labour give councils more money?
Well, I hear that, what we just heard there from Crawley, everywhere I go. I mean, the economy is in a total mess, but even Conservative MPs are calling on their own government to back councils. What we've had over the last 14 years is really a hollowing out of so many of the services on which local people depend. And, you know, in my community, that's meant that charities and others have stepped in.
So given
but it's
that,
not adequate.
Given that, would Labour give councils more money?
You know, the record of the last Labour government was to invest in our local communities, but I can't make commitments right now, given the fact the economy is in a complete mess. We ended up with that ridiculous mini budget that crashed the economy. There will be some really tough choices ahead, but in some areas it is clear where actually relatively small amounts of public investment can make a significant difference, not just in terms of creating jobs, stimulating the local economy, but also better life chances for children too. And lots of pressures that councils are facing at the moment, for example, are around children with special educational needs and disabilities. And if we do more upfront when they're younger, then I think we could ultimately save councils money in the long run.
And I know how passionate you are about early intervention, early years education, which I do want to come on to. But honestly, I think a lot of councillors will listen to that and they'll be worried. They'll be like, look, hang on, we're in the red here. What are we going to do? And Labour aren't saying you're going to spend more than the Conservatives.
I recognise the pressures they're under, the frustrations that they're facing at the moment, but I think we saw what came of politicians making commitments they just couldn't honour. Those unfunded tax cuts, for example, that Liz Truss and the Conservatives delivered that mean that every month people are paying more on their mortgages, people when they're remortgaging, ending up with higher rates. So you've got to take responsible and sensible decisions. But of course we want to get to a position where local councils are able to provide the services that they are required to do in law, and many aren't, and that's why they're going to the wall.
Let's talk about persistent absence from school, something that's been going up since the pandemic. How worried are you about this, and what would you do to try and help the situation?
I'm incredibly concerned about what we're seeing around persistent absenteeism at the moment. It's 1 in 5 children who are regularly out of school at the moment. That's 1.5 million children across our country. If that continues, if we don't start to make progress on it, it's going to rise to 1 in 4. That's why I've been setting out Labour's long-term plan about how we make sure that children and families are properly supported. So government's got a role to play, and I've set out lots of measures around breakfast clubs, mental health support, you know, more support for families. I know it's tough at the moment. But alongside that, we do need parents to do their bit too. And that message that every day at school really does matter has become lost. And we see, I think, a worrying drift in terms of attitudes from parents sometimes that it doesn't always matter to get your children to school every day. It does really matter for them, but also for the whole school too, because it disrupts the learning of other children. Teachers have to recover things again and again. It disrupts the pattern of learning.
It's interesting. So you are up front saying, actually, poor parenting is a factor here.
I'm being upfront about the fact it is a complex issue that we're going to have to work together to fix, and that parents, alongside government, alongside schools, have got responsibilities. It's about a partnership. It's about working together. We've got a very fractured relationship at the moment between government and schools, and also between schools and families. But I do think there's more that government could do to make life easier for families, like cutting the cost of school uniforms. I've said that schools shouldn't be insisting on very large numbers of branded items. For example, that costs parents a fortune, puts pressure on that relationship between schools and families. Alongside that, universal free breakfast clubs in our primary schools, so easing that pressure on families, but also better outcomes for children. I mean, the evidence is clear that breakfast clubs are about the club, not just the breakfast. You know, better attendance, better outcomes overall.
Childcare, nurseries, another huge issue across the country for lots of families, and one actually very popular, I think, government policy is to extend the free hours that you're entitled to parents of 2-year-olds from April. There's been a few concerns around this policy, whether parents can access the codes they need, whether nurseries have got the staff to make it happen. How worried are you about the way it's being rolled out?
Well, I am concerned, and it's clear that the Treasury are concerned about this. And, we've seen them, Treasury sources voicing their concerns about, I won't repeat the language they used, about how it's not working at the moment. I mean, this is what comes of, the Chancellor rushing into a decision in the budget, in the last budget, after I've been doing all the running on this issue to make the case for childcare and early education. But where we get to with the current government is a pledge and no plan to make it happen. I'm determined that a Labour government will be different. And that's why I've asked Sir David Bell, who was formerly the Chief Inspector of Ofsted, to lead Labour's early years review on this. So how do we make sure we deliver more places, higher quality, and also the workforce we need? A big part of this at the moment, and why the government are really struggling, is that we haven't got a plan around workforce and we're not creating the places that we need.
I think, I'm a 39-year-old mum, so I feel like childcare is kind of my sort of mastermind specialist subject, to be honest. And what I hear an awful lot from parents is, I pay a fortune for childcare, the staff don't get paid much, the quality isn't great. What's going on? Why isn't this all adding up?
Because what we're getting to a position when this reform will work through is that over 80% of childcare spend in this country is funded directly from the government, but they're not using that to drive up standards in the sector. If we're spending all of that public money, why are we not making sure we're delivering better progression and
Where's
pay
it
for
go?
staff?
Why are we not?
Partly because in this country, well, there are lots of reasons driving it. Part of it is we do spend less than other countries. Part of it is also that we've got a different model where it comes to the operation of it. We have a mixed market, that's fine. But I think the focus we need is on how we better connect early years education and childcare into the school system. So connecting that more effectively so that when children arrive at school, they're ready to go. At the moment, lots of children are arriving, especially post-pandemic, worrying reports about children arriving, not being able to communicate properly, in some cases still not having learned how to use the toilet. That's where really great early education can come into.
Rishi Sunak's flagship education policy, or one of them, is maths to 18. You, of course, are someone who said we should focus on the early years. Would you keep the maths to 18 policy if you do become Education Secretary after the election?
Well, it won't have happened because there isn't the time for the government to deliver on this. And
so will you keep the policy? That's why it matters, right?
Not,
what you think?
Well, it won't have happened and there isn't the time to do it before the election. It's not deliverable. I mean, we don't have enough maths teachers to teach kids to GCSE at the moment. Chances are there's a strong possibility that if your child is studying for maths GCSE, they're not being taught by a maths specialist. 1 in 10 maths lessons not being delivered by a specialist. It's not the area I think that needs the greatest attention. If we're to make the biggest impact in children's lives, I believe it's when children are younger. And that's why early years, for me, if I were Education Secretary, would be my #1 priority. It's where we can make the biggest impact.
So you ditch the policy? That's really what you're saying,
well,
isn't it?
I mean, frankly, there won't be anything to ditch because it won't have happened.
But you won't bring it in then?
Well, the government know this. And, instead of focusing...
You wouldn't bring it in as a policy then? It would just float away?
It would not be where I would focus my energies, no. I think if we want to inspire children to really love maths and to engage with maths, then a bigger push around early years and primary numeracy is what we should be doing. It's no good if children have given up at 6, insisting they study it beyond 16, and that's the kind of ridiculous position that we've got to with the government right now.